All right, so we're going to go over chapter 37, Off to School. The boys are attending school again in the fall, and they will be attended and accompanied by their tutor, the Paedagogus Eucleides. As per usual, there'll be 5 embedded items, so be on the listen out for those while you obviously watch this video and learn the chapter hopefully better. Mane here means early in the morning. If it were from the verb mane or manere, indicating to remain, wait, or stay, it would be manere, and you would drop the re, of course, and you see the difference between mane, wait, as a command, versus mane, meaning early in the morning. So early in the morning, there has been, food from soon essay, a maximus strepitus, a very great, it's superlative, noise, hubbub, ruckus in the city. Dogs were barking, la trabant. Slaves were running through the streets, but neque Marcus, neque Sextus, neither Marcus nor Sextus moved himself. Mowit, with that long O, tells me that it is perfect tense, and it has, of course, the perfect ending. If it were present, it'd be the present stem, present vowel, and present ending. He moves, is moving, does move, versus he moved, he did move himself. Still, Sextus was lying. Yakeo yakere. This is from the verb yakere, a second conjugation that means to lie down, versus yakeo yakere. If it were the verb he was throwing, the vowel before the ba would be different. This is a third io, so it would be yakie, but. So you can see the difference between he was throwing versus he was lying. So still, Sextus was lying in his bed. And he was cogitating. He was thinking, cogito cogitare, with himself. Who is more miserable? IOR tells me that it is comparative. Now whenever you have a comparative, be on the lookout either for the word quam or for an ablative. And there's our ablative. Remember, ego, mei, mihi, me. You can see it here. Nominative, ego, mei, mihi, me, and me. Both the accusative and the ablative, im, long, e. And here now we then know to translate it not by, with, because of, from, in, on, at, but rather than. Who is more miserable than me? If I wanted to change this from the ablative of comparison to using the quam, remember when you do have a quam, the case of the word that is being compared is going to be in the same case as the word it's being compared to. Quis is nominative, and so ego. And it's thus in English even, who is more miserable, not than me, but who is more miserable than I, implied am miserable. Quotidiae, on the daily, every single day, before light, it is necessary for me to set out to school. A couple of things here. One, is that we are encountering in this chapters more and more deponent verbs. Deponent verbs, remember, are those verbs that look passive but translate actively. So if I were to have given you agi, a passive infinitive, remember, long are turns into long ari, long ere turns into long eri, but a short ere is going to turn into a long I. So agere, to drive, agi, to be driven. And of course a long ire will turn into a long iri. And so, to be verbed, but here because it is deponent, even though it looks passive, you translate it to verb. Proficiscor, proficisci, profectus sum. And that SC, remember, tells us this is an inceptive action. Inceptive actions, or verbs, are those that imply beginning, instantaneous beginning action. For example, if I were to set out to the office when I'm halfway down the hall, I can't keep setting out. It's something you do at the very beginning and can't continue to do it afterwards. And it not only is a deponent infinitive to set out, but it is also functioning as the subject, in which there's your equal sign, and this is a CPA, a complement predicate adjective. So on the daily, it is necessary for me to set out to school. The act of setting out is the necessary thing. But I fear, vereor, another deponent. We should be translating it, I am verbed. And that's what we see with both laudor and castigor. Those are not deponents. But here, because it is a deponent, a second conjugation, you can tell because of the eo, just like moeo moere. It is not I am feared, but I fear. But I fear to go to school ad ludum. That's your first word, verior, V-E-R-E-O-R, in line 4. And here, note the difference. Here I fear, here I am never praised. I am castigated, rebuked. We live in the deep south, gotten on to, always. So we didn't like to go to school because he's always getting in trouble. I am never praised in school. I am always yelled at. I am always castigated. He then goes on to say his problems. I am not able to hold in memory. This is an idiom, meaning to remember. But it's literally to hold in memory, because of from in on at, those verses of Virgil. So he says he doesn't have the ability, which of course we all know is a bunch of bunk. He just doesn't put in the effort. Everybody has the ability to memorize stuff. It's whether we want to or not. Toothbrushes from my children. Note here, where Seuss with the long US. It is a fourth declension. Where Seuss, where Seuss, where Sue, where Soon, where Sue, where Seuss, and so forth and so on. It's either going to be accusative plural, nominative plural, or genitive singular. And because of what's modifying it, and its function in the sentence, I know that it is accusative plural. It's what he claims that he is not able to hold those verses of Virgil. Virgil was the central part of the education. Ille grammaticus, that teacher. And here another deponent verb, experior, experiri, also new to this chapter. The verb to test, and so it looks passive, but we translate it actively. That teacher tests me. And every day he says the same neuter plural accusative things. Now, this, of course, is from is-a-id. In the whole of the chart, asa, asa, ae, ae, ae. But remember, to is-a-id, when you put a dem, it's going to mean the same. And here it is, that accusative plural neuter. He says from dico, dicere, dixi, dictus, the same neuter plural things. You, Sextus, you know, scio, scire, nothing. Because another deponent verb. We want to say because you are verbed, but it is not translated that way. It's translated actively because you are always verbing. You are always talking. Now this, of course, comes from loquor, loqui. So that short ERE becomes long I. And here we have the present stem, the ending ris, and that's really a short I, the present vowel. It turns into an E because of the ending ris. If it were a long E, instead of being what it really is, a short I, then it would be future. So you know nothing because you are always talking. Well, well. Either or. And by the way, your second word is loquiris, L-O-Q-U-E-R-I-S, in line 6. Or, he says, you are the worst boy, a superlative of malus. Malus bad, pessimus worst. Or, if not, unless, except. That word nisi can mean all three. So let's do all three. If you will not work, you see how I said if and not? If you will not work more diligently. Remember, the comparative adverb will have the letters I-U-S. And so, if you will not work more diligently, unless you will work more diligently, except really doesn't work here. So if not or unless, you will. Again, that is a BI. The ris turns that short I into an E. Not a deponent, so we make it passive. So whereas this was active, this one is really passive. You will be beaten. So he's given threats, is the teacher. Therefore, I want to remain. Note the difference here versus early in the morning. At home. Locative case is do-me. So, as is the case with many students, it's not really Sextus's fault. It's that the teacher's mean to him. The teacher doesn't like him. And a bunch of other hooey. Fact is, he just doesn't work hard enough. And that's why he has troubles at school. So, continuing on. It says, Ita cogitabat Sextus. Sextus was cogitating, an English word that means to think. So he was thinking ita in such a way when. Now, the word cum can mean with or when. If there is an ablative with it, it's the preposition with. But if there is not, you will translate it when. So thus Sextus was thinking in such a way. Sextus was thinking when Eucleides, the tutor, entered. Ingressus est, did go in. It looks passive. We want to say has been verbed or was verbed. For example, if I were to have had amatus est, it would be Eucleides the tutor was loved, has been loved. But because this is a deponent, ingredior ingredi, a third io, ingressus sum, it is going to be then translated actively. So, when Eucleides the tutor, the pedagogue, entered, did go in, has gone in, not has been, but has gone in, into his bedroom. Surgite, a command, more than one person. Plural imperative. Rise, boys, he says. Noli, plus the infinitive, don't stay, don't remain, don't wait in the bed. Not for a long time. That's just diu. Diu is for a long time. For a longer time. We would in English say any longer. For it is time to set out. Not to be set out, because again, this is a deponent. Looks passive, translates actively. Profekiskor, profekiski. Third conjugation. Short ere turns into long I. To set out to school. Where Pailemon, that most erudite, most scholarly, eruditus, gives us the English word erudite. And here it is superlative, issimus. That most erudite grammaticus teacher, he, Pailemon, will accept y'all happy. Now in English we don't say he will do it happily, but that would make us turn that adjective into the adverb. English prefers the adverb, Latin prefers the adjective. The adverb would be, of course, laete, but here it says, he, the happy one, will receive y'all. A couple of three things going on here. One, the nature of Roman education. At the very beginning, what you would do is you would go to what we would consider primary school, and you would be taught by a literator. So you would go to what is known as the ludus literarius, where you'd learn literally, pun intended, your letters. After that, you go to secondary school, what we would consider in our society, middle and high school. And that is taught to you by a grammaticus, and that's where most people's education would end. However, if you're going to go into politics and be of a family like the Cornelians are, Marcus probably will follow in his father's footsteps and try to become a senator, you're going to go to what we would consider maybe like a university, but the kind of teacher that you would of course go to, and most likely in Greece, Athens particularly, would be a rhetor. A rhetor. And they would of course teach you rhetoric, the art of speaking, and the usage of the language. So you start out with the literator, then the grammaticus, and then the rhetor. Now, this fellow right here, Pailemon, actually is a famous guy. In that, the greatest of all teachers that we are aware of in the ancient Roman world is, of course, Quintilian. Quintilian is a fellow who was a professor, Quintilian, there it is, Quintilianus, as a professor of rhetoric, he was a rhetor, and he wrote a work that was called the Institution of Oratory, Institutio Oratore. And in it, he lays out how to become a great orator. And he worshipped the great orators of previous years to him, particularly Cicero. And he was the teacher himself of the very famous Pliny the Younger. But Quintilian's teacher was Pailemon. And so just like in the previous chapters when we met the poet Martial, again we have a real-life teacher interwoven into this fictitious story. So, at any rate, the literator teaching you your letters at the ludus literarius, the grammaticus teaching you, of course, at secondary school, and then the very select few go off and have, as their third teacher, the rhetor for public speaking and usage of the language. So, where Pailemon, that very scholarly teacher, grammaticus, will receive y'all, he, the happy one. Grammaticus is your next word. Grammaticus, line 10. Make sure you have it spelled correctly. He will teach y'all plurima. Now, he's not going to teach y'all multa, many neuter plural accusative things. He's not going to teach you plura, more neuter plural accusative things. This is superlative, very many neuter plural accusative things, which will be the future of sumese, ero, ereseret, eremeseret, erunt, so will be very useful, most useful for y'all. So Euclides is all excited about going off to school. The boys have a different reaction. The boys responded nothing. The boys, in Wheaty, unwilling, they arose out of the bed. Just like the happy guy will receive, the unwilling boys did arise. Surgo, surgere, sorexi. We in English would say unwillingly, but they prefer in Latin the adjective to modify the subject. Unwilling, they rose out of bed. They did put on, they have put on their vestes, their clothes, and egressi sunt, another deponent verb. Egressi sunt is just like ingressi sunt. They share the stem, gradior, the first principal part, gradi, the second principal part, and gressus sum. And you can put all kinds of prefixes on the front of it. You put means to go, progradior, to progress, go forward. Ingradior, to go in. And of course we have here agradior, exgradior, to go out. Deponent verbs, looked passively translates active. But here we would want to say they have been verbed, but no, it is active. So they did go out. They went out. They have gone out. Not passively, although it looks passive. And they did go out of their house. Egressi sunt is your next word. Two words, E-G-R-E-S-S-I, space for the second word, S-U-N-T. Make sure you spell them correctly. So, deponents all over the place in this chapter. Not yet was it shining, but they set out, they did set out. Again, that same verb we've seen several times already. Profekiskor, profekiski, profectus. Here it is, they did do it. Even though it looks passive, it's a deponent verb. With Euclides, please note the difference of cum Euclides. When Euclides does something, cum, next word is not an ablative. Here, the next word is an ablative. So now the cum is the preposition with, and that's how it translates. But they did set out into the streets of the city with Euclides. Euclides was carrying Pharaoh Feri Tulilatus, an accusative lantern, pry in front of them. Pry Pharaoh means to carry an accusative item in front of a dative item. And so therefore, the accusative lantern in front of the dative them. From, of course, is id. And so, on the way to school, as I'm sure has been the case with you before, if ever you've been carried to school, you spot the Chick-fil-A or whatever breakfast fast food restaurant you prefer and suggest to your mom or dad driving, hey, why don't we stop there? And so suddenly, Marcus spotted a certain shop, quandam. It's from quiquaquod, quis, quim, quam, quod. When you add a nom to it, it's going to mean a certain, just like with is, id. Had I put a D-E-M, it would have been the same, but here a certain. Marcus spotted, did spot a certain shop. Look, Euclides. Marcus shouted. Do you see? There it is asking a question. That shop? It is a bakery, a pastrinum. Lecetne nobis aliquid cibi imere. Is it allowed, again, in asking the question, for us in the dative case of reference, to buy something of the food? This is your genitive. Part of the whole. And we are then taking what part of it? The something part. Aliquis someone. Aliquid something. So, he wanted to know, can we stop off? Esto, the future imperative. The plural of this would be estote. Now, this verb, to be, also has a imperative that is present. So es, exclamation point, and este. But it all translates roughly the same. Let it be, let them be. Be one person. Be you more than one person. You got to be careful with S, because look, it's S exclamation point versus S period. That same exact form is also an indicative. The statement you are. You are whatever. Be. So if let's say we would add to it happy. Be happy versus you are happy is a statement. But the equivalency would be that este is just like estote and S is just like esto, but it's the plural imperative. Let it be, Euclides responded. Non sero est, it is not late. Even if etiamsi, there's the if, there's the even. We, and I know it's we because I look and I see my verb there, having an mus ending. This is from the verb edo esse. It is a weird verb that means to eat, and look at the second principal part, yikes, you will confuse it with the verb to be, but don't in the context. Even if we eat, and it's future, because it is a third conjugation. So even if we will eat something of food, exact same phrase that we saw previously, part of whole with the genitive kibi. Nevertheless, I see alongi, future will be, we will arrive to school at the time. We would say on time. Therefore, the boys buy pastries, some donuts. Euclides buys bread and paulum, a little bit of wine. Again, weenie, genitive, part of a whole. And what part of the wine? It's the little bit part. And while they devour their yentaculum, their breakfast, remember that yentaculum is breakfast, prandium is lunch, and dinner is cena, Marcus and Sextus talk. It looks passive, loquor loqui. Again, a third conjugation, loquor loqui, locutus sum, deponent verb, but translates actively even though it looks passive. So Marcus and Sextus talk, not they are talked, they do the talking between themselves. At last, profecti. Now, this is from the verb proficiscor, proficisci, profectus sum, and it is the fourth principal part, not paired up with a form of the verb to be, and so it's a perfect passive looking participle. We will not translate it having been verbed, but it's going to be then actively having verbed. So at last, again, they, implied the boys and Euclides, the ones having set out. Not having been, because it's deponent. Looks passive, translates actively. Having set out, soon they were approaching, and this is a special verb that requires a dative object. The only kind of things that one can approach is a dative thing. They were approaching the ludo, the school. And remember, the difference is that a ludus, singular, is a school. Ludi, plural, those would be games or entertainments like the ludi circenses, the chariot races. And so your perfect passive looking participle, and that's your last item, profecti, P-R-O-F-E-C-T-I, that you'll find in line 20. Do well on the quizzes, and hopefully you're starting to understand deponents a little bit better as we're seeing them in context. Thanks.